you've gotten to know everything about my path, I would like to introduce Devora Lindeman. She is a partner at Greenwald Doherty, and she practices employment law. And she went to law school at a later stage in her life. So she has a non-traditional career path, and she's going to talk to you today about why she decided to go to law school and how she made it through, and some considerations for non-traditional students. So I'll let Devora take it away.
Thank you, Angie, and thank you, everybody, for your patience in dealing with these technological issues. I really appreciate Angie inviting me to speak with you today. My journey to becoming a lawyer is pretty unusual. I'm going to talk to you today about that journey and hopefully give you some inspiration if you're also following, or if you're considering following, a non-traditional path to law school. A traditional path would be graduating high school, going to college, maybe studying political science or something else pre-law, then going to law school, and then getting a job. I didn't do that. Well, I did go to law school and I did get a job, but the path to get there was anything but traditional. Life is full of choices, and you're not always going to make the right ones. You're not necessarily going to know at the time whether you made the right choice or not. You have to see how it plays out. And it also happens that what was the right choice at one point, down the road, it becomes not so much. They say you should follow your passion. That's nice, but you also need to eat. So career choices need to include both doing something you enjoy and something that'll pay the bills. You'll see that the choices that I made on my very windy road somehow did wind up in law school. Being a lawyer can be a great career, but it's not for everybody. Law is for people who like to use their brains, not their brawn. It's for people that like to solve puzzles and do problems. It's for people who like to read and then think about what they read and then talk about what they read. My dad was a lawyer. He was a typical small town lawyer that did just about everything. My dad did wills and he represented criminals. He'd been both an assistant district attorney and a public defender, defending those who couldn't afford a lawyer themselves. He handled divorces and traffic tickets and car accidents. He did real estate closings and worked with the county legislature. He took just about everything that walked in the door. Some lawyers, like me, do just one thing. I'm what's called a management side employment lawyer. I work just with businesses and I help them deal with all the laws that apply when you have employees. You don't need to know what type of law you want to do when you go to law school. Some people do, but most don't, and I certainly didn't. When I started law school, I thought I would take over my dad's small town law practice, but things don't always work out the way you expect. Sometimes they can be even better. But let me back up to the beginning, with my parents assuming from when I was very, very young that I was going to be a lawyer, just like my father. You see, I like to argue, but I didn't want to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a ballerina. So by the time I was in high school, I was taking almost as many hours of dance classes outside of school as I was taking academic classes in school. I studied ballet and modern. It's called contemporary now, and jazz and acrobatics, and I performed with a folk dance group. I was no academic slouch in high school and was taking honors and AP classes, and everyone expected me to go to college. Me? I just wanted to dance. Yes, I worked some summers in my father's law office or when he was public defender, but I also spent summers at dance and theater camps. Let's see. I was a jet girl in West Side Story and a nun in Sound of Music. So after high school, yes, I went to college as a dance and choreography major. Yes, I went to a liberal arts school and I had to study some other things. However, at that time, there really wasn't anything else I wanted to do. Working for my father over the summer hadn't convinced me to be the lawyer that my parents still wanted me to be. But you see, being a good dancer at your local dance school doesn't mean that you're going to cut it in the competitive world of dance. At my college, Sarah Lawrence, every dance student had been the best at their local dance school. I was okay, but I wasn't great. And I wanted to be great at something. I just didn't know what that was. I even took a semester in college off to go to Israel on a youth leadership training program. I lived on a kibbutz, which is a communal village where everybody pitched in and the community covered your living expenses, medical, things like that. And yes, I picked oranges in Israel, but I also did a lot of other things, like stomping cotton. After the cotton was picked, it was thrown into a huge container, and we would get in and jump on it to pack it down. Literally, stomping cotton meant stomping on the cotton. That was the job. I also packed chickens. No, we didn't jump on the chickens to pack them in. You ran after them and you picked them up by their feet and shoved them into the crate. And yes, I took dance classes in Israel and studied Hebrew and went on field trips to all those places where history happened. And then I came back to college, and you guessed it, I studied dance and choreography. I also had to take some other courses, because they kind of want you to have a variety of credits, but there was no rhyme or reason to what else I studied. At my college, we didn't exactly have to declare an academic major, and mine clearly was dance. But I took a history course, evolution, architecture, religious creation stories. After completing my junior year in college, I got a summer job as a receptionist in a nonprofit organization in New York City that supported artists. It was a time when jobs were scarce, and I had friends who had just graduated as seniors who didn't have jobs. When the organization asked me to stay in the fall, I did. I dropped out of college after 3 years with tons of dance credit and credit that I'd somehow managed to wrangle for that semester in Israel by writing extra research papers. That organization was willing to train me on the job, and I learned a lot about administration and management. And although I was excited to be supporting artists, my jobs were always backlines administrative work. They did have an artist showcase, and I did get to perform periodically. And I actually choreographed a piece that was performed as part of the Israeli Folk Dance Festival at Avery Fisher Hall at Lincoln Center. But mainly, I worked at administrative jobs until, after a few years, I actually wound up as head of the organization's treasury division. Paying bills, doing payroll, balancing checkbooks, dealing with donations for the organization, finance stuff. I was surprised to find it interesting. It was an opportunity that fell in my lap, and I probably wouldn't have sought it out on my own. I was a kid who took 3 languages in high school to avoid taking math and science, and here I was managing the treasury division of a nonprofit organization. I worked with that organization for a while. I got married, I got pregnant, and we moved out of New York City, but I continued to commute to the city for work. I got pregnant again, and then just found it was too difficult to commute with 2 kids. So I spent the 14 years after I dropped out of college moving from one administrative job to another. Of course, I would say after the fact that I had a very particular reason for leaving one job and moving to another. I learned something at each job, how to work with different people, how to do different things. At one point, my family moved to California. Then we moved back to New York. I was 34, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. Clearly, I was not going to be a ballerina. And then the office manager at my father's law office quit. He asked me if I would help him out until he could hire someone else. I said, of course. Office management was one thing I'd done quite a bit of, and I liked it. His office manager, however, was also his paralegal, and he started training me on the job to do that. Mind you, this was doing legal research in the books, reading legal cases in the law books to find law that you needed to support the different brief points, and doing other different types of administration particular to a paralegal. Westlaw, that online legal research tool, was just beginning to become popular. I really enjoyed working as a paralegal, but I was still looking at this as somewhat of a temporary gig. One day, my father turned to me and he said, "If you were a lawyer, I could send you to this deposition." A deposition, as you may know, is an opportunity for one side in a litigation to interview the other party under oath and get information about their side of the case. Taking a deposition means you're the one asking the questions, and that person needs to be a lawyer. I thought about it for a minute, and then my reply to my father was, if I went to law school, I could. And that simple conversation set the wheels in motion. Sometimes it's something very simple that can make a change in your whole life's direction. You never know what it's going to be. You never know what's going to make you look at something in a new light. I don't know if I would have thought of going to law school if it hadn't been for that conversation. I hadn't thought about it up to that point. Even with my father being a lawyer, even working in his office, my parents had long since given up pushing me to be a lawyer. And after all, I'd resisted it up to that point in my life. If it hadn't been for that conversation, I might have helped my father hire another office manager and then moved on to my next thing. I was looking at working for my father as just another job, another opportunity that had come my way until I found something else. But we did have that conversation, and I did begin to think about going to law school. Now, remember, I hadn't graduated college, a minor prerequisite for a law school. I thought it would work out because I needed time to study for and then take the LSAT and apply to law schools. I figured I'd do those things while I finished college. Remember, I'd finished 3 years and thought I only needed to do one more. Then I hit my first hurdle. My college credits were too old. I had to find a college I could go to that was within commuting distance of my house. I was married with kids. My husband had a job. Moving wasn't an option. I contacted a number of the local colleges, but either they wouldn't accept any of my credits because they were too old, or they would only take some of them. Most didn't want to take my dance credit. Some schools wanted me to do 2 years over again, if not more. Even with all that life experience, you know how sometimes they say college will give you experience for life? Well, I still couldn't piece together 3 years worth of college credit. I really did not want to go back to school for any more years than I absolutely had to. I bit the bullet and I contacted my former college, Sarah Lawrence. You know why I didn't want to call to begin with? I didn't think there was any way I could pay private college tuition at that point in my life. But I called, and yes, they would give me credit for all 3 years. They were happy to have me come back. I was able to get student loans for the 1 more year, and there I was, matriculated as an undergraduate. As luck would have it, I still lived less than an hour away from my old college, and the commute was reasonable. And I became a college student again at 35. When I spoke in class, my viewpoint was often different from the rest of the class, and sometimes from the professor. Of course it would be. I had that many more years of life experience to draw from, but I loved it. I actually did not like college the first time around. I felt just a little bit lost. There was so much to figure out. But now I was there with a purpose. My plan was to ace my classes so I could get into law school. I was able to choose classes that really interested me. No dance classes this time. And I learned not to care what other people thought or if I stood out or was different. Going to college as an older person, older in your 30s, is a challenge. And I thought I was best served by just keeping to myself and getting my work done. College wasn't also going to be my social life. I wasn't there to make friends. Of course, I was friendly and nice, but I didn't make an effort to make friends. I was just going to school. Besides, I had my family, and our daughters were then 3 and 9, and I was lucky that my husband was a good cook, and he picked up a lot of the housework so I could study. And yes, he was working too. A piece of advice, if you're going to go back to school as an older student, don't do that. It's not that you need to make friends. It's that you need to build relationships. Even after all my years of working, I didn't understand that. During that first year, finishing up college, I took the LSAT prep course, studied for the LSAT, applied to law schools, did the whole routine. But applying to law schools was also a challenge. One law school told me I didn't have enough credits yet to be applying to law school. Yes, that again. Well, fine. Guess I wasn't going to that law school. I was accepted to Rutgers School of Law in Newark, New Jersey. And then came figuring out how to pay for that. Yes, Rutgers is a state school, but I didn't live in New Jersey. So I had to pay out-of-state tuition. I took out student loans, which, by the way, I am still paying back. I decided to attend law school on a full day schedule so I could do it in 3 years. Rutgers also had an evening program for working students, which took 4 years, but I decided not to work and just focus on school. My husband and I decided that we'd make that work somehow. And so I started law school. When I attended the new student orientation, it was clear I was going to again be surrounded by people who had taken the traditional high school, college, law school route. Fine. Again, I wasn't going to school to socialize. Yeah, I missed the relationship thing in law school too. But there I was, 15 years after I dropped out of college, with a college degree and sitting in law school orientation. Going to school as an older student does have some advantage. I already knew about time management. I was a good student. I was organized. I could prioritize. I wasn't trying to figure out life at the same time that I was trying to figure out the law. True, I had to balance my kids and school and everything else, but we made it work. As I mentioned, when I went to law school, I thought I would take over my dad's law practice. Actually, I thought I might become a lawyer through the New York State apprenticeship program. Many states have these, where a person can apprentice with an established lawyer for some number of years, and then take the bar exam and become a lawyer. In New York, you need to go to law school for at least 1 year and then apprentice in a law firm for at least 3. There's a website called likelincoln.org that lays out the requirements for each state that has these programs. I have no idea how current or accurate this website is, only that it exists. Likelincoln, one word, .org, you know, because Abraham Lincoln was a self-taught lawyer who didn't go to law school. I thought I would do that, go to law school for 1 year, apprentice with my father, take the bar exam, and then take over his practice, doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that. My dad had actually apprenticed one lawyer, and she had passed the bar and was practicing in another firm. That was my plan until I got my first semester grades. Remember how I said I was looking for something where I could be great? I found that unexpectedly in law school. I aced my exam. And that opened doors to me that I had never expected, with opportunities I hadn't previously dreamed about. There are arguments over whether your grades in law school are any measure of how well you actually are going to do in the practice of law. There are arguments that say that just because you're a good test taker doesn't make you a good lawyer. I'm going to argue that how well a person does in law school may well be an appropriate measure of their ability to practice law. For example, many law school exams are open book. Not all of them, but when they are, you need to learn to recognize the issues raised in the exam and then know where to find the answer. That's exactly what you do as a lawyer. No law school exam is just spitting back facts that you've memorized. You need to use your brain. Some classes didn't have exams at all. They required you to write final papers. And all courses, at least in my school, required that as a portion of your grade, they counted attendance and class preparation. Showing up, being prepared, being ready and willing to discuss the topic of the day, that all mattered. And that's what you need to do as a lawyer. You can't coast through law school. If you do and expect to be a good lawyer, think again. You need to be prepared to work hard, do the assignments, stick to your schedule, show up in class. There's really no mystery how to do well in law school, but I'll give you a few tips. 1, do the reading, be prepared for class. 2, read the footnotes. They're there for a reason. And 3, look up the words that you don't understand, or you don't understand how the author is using them. That thing about understanding words in their context, it doesn't work. That's what dictionaries are for. Find the right meaning of the word for the context of what you're reading. Use the word in sentences until it's yours. That's what's going to make you a good student. That's what's going to help you understand the materials, understanding the words. That applies to all study, not just law school. Even better, read the derivation of the word. It can help you understand the word better. Now, where was I? Oh, right. Talking about how your grades may be a measure of how well you do as a lawyer. Well, maybe they are, but grades aren't everything. And my good grades didn't seem to be enough to help me with what I needed on my next step. Because good grades open up opportunity. Lots of the very large and even quite a few of the medium-sized law firms hire what are called summer associates. I didn't know there was even such a thing as a summer associate until a fellow student asked me if I was going to the summer associate orientation meeting toward the end of our first year. Summer associate positions are usually filled by these larger law firms with law students who are at the upper percent of their class. These students spend the summer, June, July, August, between their second and third years of law school, working at a law firm in the hopes that at the end of that time, they get a job offer for after graduation. Applications for summer associate programs are usually due around August after your first year of law school, which means you're spending that first summer researching law firms, putting together cover letters and resumes and submitting them by the deadlines so that you can hope to get some interviews. This is also the same summer where you just might be trying to write onto a law journal. Now, just a brief aside about law journals. If you have the opportunity, go for it. Some law schools let the top students grade on, and others are chosen through a writing competition. At Rutgers, everyone had to write on. The best thing I got out of being on the Rutgers Law Review was having to painstakingly cite check and proofread the articles that were going to be published. That's what journals do. Outside scholars and professors submit articles for publication. There's a whole selection process, and then the articles are checked by the students. You have to find every source that the author used, even the obscure one. You get to be very good friends with the law librarians. And then you review that source to make sure it stands for what the author is saying it stands for. And then you make sure the citation is in the proper format. You proofread and you edit. And yes, you also have to write your own note or comment too. But mainly, you're editing the work of others. And proofreading and cite checking and learning the specific citation format that you're going to use in briefs and memos and other writings as a lawyer is a key skill to have. Now, back to the summer associate job. So that summer after your first year, when you may be trying to get a summer associate job and writing onto a journal, you submit your applications in or around August. And then there are on-campus interviews in the fall of your second year or right before the year starts, followed by callbacks at the law firms for the lucky ones. My plan for taking over my dad's small town law practice had evaporated. And I applied for summer associate positions with all the big firms. I had no rhyme or reason where I applied. I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. Because I lived outside New York City, I applied to most every firm within what I thought might be a reasonable commute, and even some that weren't. I got lots and lots of on-campus interviews, and even lots and lots of callbacks, and no offers. In the back of my mind, I wondered whether my age had anything to do with it. I don't know. I don't think I'll ever know. But finally, I did get one offer, which I accepted, at a general practice law firm in New Jersey. I did well my second year, both in class and working as an editor on the Law Review. The summer following that second year, I worked my butt off that summer at that summer associate job, rotating through many of the law firm's departments and working with many types of lawyers. It was a great experience to actually see how a large law firm worked and what the different types of lawyers did. My feedback through the summer was always good, except for one incident. You see, my oldest daughter was graduating 6th grade that summer, that June, and then she would be going to junior high. It was a big deal, and of course I was going to be there. I'd made arrangements with the summer associate coordinator to take that day off at the start of the program. I made sure the lawyers I was working with knew I wasn't going to be there on that day. I thought I had taken care of everything. I was being responsible and making sure things were covered so I could take the day off. Until I got back the next day and got berated by a partner for whom I'd turned in a memo the week before, who was looking for me, of course, on that day that I wasn't there. I hadn't thought to tell him I'd be out, how was I supposed to know he was going to need something from me that day? And then there was another incident. When I asked one of the women attorneys I had worked with what I could do to improve, what should I focus on to make me a better lawyer? I looked up to her and had enjoyed working with her. I thought she might give me some words of wisdom. I thought she might say something about my research or writing skills, because that's pretty much what you do as a summer associate. No. She told me to lose weight and get my ears pierced and wear more makeup, cut my hair, wear more stylish suits. I didn't know what. At the end of that summer, I didn't get an offer to go back to that firm after law school. When I asked for some feedback as to why, all I was told is that a large law firm likely was not a good fit for you, and I should look at working at a smaller firm. I cried. What else could I do? Looking back, I realized it was one of those blessings in disguise. If I'd gotten an offer, I probably would have accepted it, and I probably would have been miserable there. So there I was with my stellar grades, starting my third year of law school without a job prospect after graduating. Most of my colleagues on law review had gotten offers and were going back to their high-powered New York City firm. It was okay. After all, I could always go back and work with my dad, which the more time went on, the more I learned I didn't want to do that. After studying different areas of law in law school, I decided I didn't want to do criminal law or family law or personal injury accident law. They're great areas and they're right for somebody, but that was the bulk of my practice for my dad, and I decided it wasn't right for me. I was really enjoying law school. I've always liked learning, but I still didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. During the third year of law school, there is another job opportunity. You can apply for judicial clerkship. Both federal and state judges take law students following graduation for a 1 or 2 year clerkship. Clerks do different things depending on the type of judge, but one thing is pretty consistent, that law clerks do legal research for the judge, help write memos about the issues raised by the parties in their briefs before the judge hears oral argument on those issues, and then help write the judicial opinions. I applied to a lot of judges. I got a fair amount of interviews and one offer. The offer was to clerk for a federal magistrate judge in the District of New Jersey. However, along with the offer, the judge told me that it was his year for reappointment. There are 2 types of federal judges at the district court level. The district judge has trial judges who are Article 3 judges. That's Article 3 of the US Constitution, and they are appointed for life. Magistrate judges are sort of assistants to the trial judges. They're appointed by Congress for 10-year terms, and my judge's 10 years were up. He felt pretty confident that he'd be reappointed, but if he wasn't, I wouldn't have a job because he'd be out of a job. I took the gamble and accepted, and he was reappointed. So, breath. I had a job after law school. It was for 1 year, but during that year, I'd be given time to job search. During my last year of law school, something else happened. I injured my back. I didn't actually do anything. One day in the second semester of my last year of law school, I couldn't walk. I had to be taken to the emergency room on a backboard. I had bulging discs in my back. The doctor thought it was from carrying all those heavy law books in my bag on my back. Rather than surgery, he prescribed physical therapy. Great. Another thing I needed to work into my schedule. As a result of my injury, I couldn't sit for long periods of time. What do you do in law school? You sit and you sit. I got permission to stand on the side aisles in class and stand up when I needed to. They gave me a handicapped parking space so I didn't have to walk from the far student parking lot. And I took my final law school exams standing up at a podium. Despite all that, I finished my last year of law school with flying colors and graduated #1 at the top of my class at age 38 with my kids cheering in the audience. After law school graduation, you have very little time to celebrate or relax. You see, there's this thing. It's called the bar exam. I highly recommend bar review courses. I had to take out a loan from the local credit union to pay for it, but it was worth it. And yes, I took the bar exam standing up at a podium and alternating between lying on a blanket on the ground because I still couldn't sit. I took the bar of 2 states, New York and New Jersey. I know that taking the bar exam is not exactly around the corner for most of you, but when you get there, consider taking the bar of 2 states if you can. You are never going to want to do that again. Yes, I passed the bar exam, both states, on the first try. And then in August, I started my clerkship with a federal magistrate judge with no idea what I was going to do after that year was over. As a clerk for a federal magistrate, I read all the briefs submitted by the lawyers who had made motions to the court asking the judge to make some sort of ruling in their case. I read all the cases that the lawyers cited in their briefs and told the judge if the cases said what the lawyers said they said. I wrote the first draft of the lawyers' opinions. And after I'd been with the judge for a few months, he asked me if I knew what I was going to do when my clerkship was over. I knew at that point more about what I didn't want to do. I knew that I did not want to litigate why the widgets didn't arrive on Tuesday. But I still didn't know what I wanted to do. I had started interviewing, and I even caved and had an interview at a firm that did matrimonial and family law, even after deciding that it wasn't for me. I was being interviewed by 3 lawyers at once, and I thought we were getting along, laughing and talking about all kinds of things until everybody else stopped talking. And one of them said to me, "You laugh an awful lot for a lawyer." I knew I could never work at that firm. So the judge talked with me about the different types of law he thought I would be good at. And he's the one that suggested employment law. That was another one of those conversations you have that just change everything. When I thought about it, that made sense to me. After all, I understood the world of work. What had I been doing since dropping out of college? Working at all different types of jobs in different types of companies and different types of situations in the for-profit and not-for-profit sector. And interestingly, one of the courses I had taken in my last year of college was women's labor history. And in law school, 2 of my electives were labor law and employment law. I don't know why I didn't connect those dots myself, but I didn't. I like that employment law dealt with humans, but without all the emotions of, say, divorce law, although there's plenty of emotion in employment cases too. So I began applying for jobs with labor and employment law firms and got a job with a prominent management side labor and employment firm in New Jersey. Why did I choose the management side? Well, from my family history, one would think I would choose the other side. Fighting for the underdog was in my blood. I am named for my great-grandmother, Devora, who lived in Russia and who secretly helped promote the Russian Revolution by running illegally printed handbills underneath her skirt. She spent time in prison in Siberia and escaped to America on a forged passport. At least that's the story I was told. I realized that on the plaintiff side, all I can do is sue companies for one or more plaintiffs who believed that they had been fired for a wrongful reason, or who believed that they'd been subject to harassment or paid wrong or otherwise suffered somehow under the employment laws. Suing a company, especially when these claims are covered by insurance, doesn't necessarily change anything. I realized if I represented the company, they'd listen to me. I would give them advice as to how to comply with the laws. I wasn't looking to change the companies or fight for the employees' rights. I was and am on the side of the business. After all, when they do get sued, I represent the business. But keep in mind, I don't see employees and managers as on two different sides. It takes both of them. It takes all of them to make a company work. All the people that play a role in a company are needed to make the company prosper. They're all part of the same team. I not only understood work, I felt that I understood business, and I could help my business clients flourish and grow from a role as their trusted advisor. And I've been working in that field as a management side employment lawyer ever since. When the partner I was working with at that first law firm invited me and a group of other associates to move with him to big law in New York City, I jumped at the chance. We were moving to one of the most prominent labor and employment departments in the country. After 8 years there, I came to a realization. Big law firms weren't for me. There's a lot of politics, a lot of competition, a lot of behind the scenes things that I didn't understand. I just wanted to do good work and help our clients. I remembered that someone had said that to me once. Big law firms aren't for you. I guess she was right. So I left and I wound up at the firm where I am now, Greenwald Doherty, as a senior counsel. When they made me an offer, I asked, what would my title be? And I negotiated for senior counsel instead of associate. At that time, that firm only had the title of associate or partner. By that time, I'd been practicing law 11 years, and more than salary, I wanted a title that reflected my years of achievement. When you are negotiating for your jobs, remember to think about everything that's important to you. After 4 years at that boutique firm, I made partner. That was 9 years ago, 34 years after dropping out of college. I had made it. I was a partner at a law firm that I enjoyed working with, doing work that I loved. And here we are. So thank you for listening to my story. I'm not sure what the moral is, but I'm hoping it was helpful to you in some way.
Devora, that was so beautiful. My jaw was just on the floor most of the time. I am just so happy that you shared that story. I know we're a little over on time because we had to start a little bit late, but I just couldn't stop you. You had so much to share, and you're your story is so powerful at every turn, because I think so many of us have experienced, many of the same setbacks. Like we've been told, you're not cut out for this, you're not at the right place, or you don't fit in, or it's not a good fit in our culture, or things like that. And I think that so many of us in the law especially, we have a hard time finding our way. And we think, okay, that first job didn't work out, maybe I'm not made for this. That second job didn't work out, maybe I'm not made for this. But the fact is it happens to all of us. It takes a while before you find the right fit. You have to find what you care about and what you're passionate about, and then align yourself with an organization that will let you thrive in their environment, doing the things that you love and doing it the way that you want to practice. And so I love hearing your story, because it's one of just, fighting all these adversities. And I'm amazed at how resilient you were throughout the whole process. I mean, despite, your physical setbacks too in law school, where you had to take all of your exams standing up. I can't imagine what that was like, taking the bar exam standing up. I mean, there was so much great knowledge to just unpack there. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. I really, really appreciate it. I don't know if you have any time for questions, but
I do, sure.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? I know there was a lot there, so I'll just give everybody a minute. But I mean, I guess one of the questions that I had is, when you were in law school and you said, you wish that you would have gotten the networking thing when you were in law school, how would you have done that differently? Why would you have done that differently? Because I think many people who go to law school miss that part.
I think it would have been sometimes simple things, like not sitting and eating lunch by myself. I considered lunchtime more study time, because I was dealing with so much with my kids and other things outside of school, that lunchtime to me was study time. I ate in the cafeteria, and a lot of people did. They brought lunch or they bought lunch, but maybe it would have been better to sit with classmates and just talk and just be there, that kind of thing, to hang out after class instead of rushing home. Again, I had all my outside responsibilities, and I was thinking that this time was my law time and class was over, I was going home. I didn't live on campus. I had no reason to hang out, but maybe I should have, gone for a cup of coffee, stayed for dinner, those kinds of things.
There's a great book, actually. There's a great book called Never Eat Alone. I'm putting the link into the chat box, but it's about just that. You can make time to bond with other humans, bond with other people.
Yes.
Even, in your downtime or off time. I mean, that's some of the best times. And I have to say, those relationships that you make with in law school, if you start making relationships in law school, those relationships will flourish into something so much more by the time you're in your practice. If you wait until you're in your early years of practice to start networking, it's going to seem like you're starting from square one, and it's going to seem so hard. But if you start doing that early on, you should definitely connect with your fellow classmates and build bonds with them. And I'm not saying, form study groups and all that. Yeah, of course, the academic stuff is important, but the bonds that you make, it's when you all go through your first final and everybody feels terrible and you go to the bar and get a beer or something, like that's when you're building bonds.
Exactly.
It's not when you're in a study group. So don't neglect that stuff too, especially those of you who are going to school virtually right now. You're going to have to make an extra intention to get to know your classmates. You're going to have to make an extra effort to reach out to people. And I know it's going to feel uncomfortable and it's going to feel weird. And asking somebody for a virtual coffee chat feels weird. I get it. But, it's so important that you do it. That's like a huge part of life. So don't neglect it. Make sure that you're bonding with each other and reaching out to people and just checking in and being like, hey, are you okay? Because I mean, when you're on Zoom especially and you're just staring at a professor and you're not really seeing everybody else, it's hard to figure out, like, are people doing all right? Are they really exhausted? Are they tired? Are they scared? Like, what's happening? So be sure to reach out and just check in on each other. I think that's a really good way to just start relationship building during this really difficult. Yeah, it is hard to meet other law students. I know some schools are, setting up specific times for like people to network and meet. So if your school is not doing that, I know some schools have started like a group me for the class, like, or a Slack channel for the class. If your school hasn't done that, you can totally initiate that. There's so many ways now that you can start building these groups with people.
There is a question there.
Yeah.
I think it's for me, which was, did I join any student groups while in law school? I actually did. I joined what was called the Decalogue Society, which is an organization for Jewish law students. We sort of held ourselves out as mentors. It was, I think, in the end of my second, early third year, as mentors to first years. Put up flyers, said anyone could come. We would have office hours, and no one ever took us up on it. And we also put together a program for Holocaust Remembrance Day. So,
Devora, there was another question
helpful.
early on in the chat too. How did you achieve being number one in the class despite having kids and balancing all of that? And how did you do it?
Not sleeping very much. Coffee. I think being diligent, and I want to go back to this point because it may have seemed like a little thing, looking up words. Have you ever read a page, got to the bottom, and then realized that you haven't got a clue what you just read? Yeah, there's a reason. There's a word on that page that you don't know the meaning of, or you don't know how the author is using it in that context. If you go back up the page, read a little slower, find what you don't understand, look it up, and read it again, like magic, the page will suddenly come alive. Words are really important. They're how the author's communicating. And it takes a little longer at first, but there's only so many words, and then you've looked them up. So I think that's part of it.
Yeah, I would completely agree. To add to that, I would say just be intellectually curious about things you don't know. Don't be afraid to admit you don't know. I think that the most important thing is, as a very junior attorney, this will happen all the time, that a partner will walk into your office and they'll do what I call a drive-by, and they're like, here's this assignment, do it, give it back to me tomorrow. And like, they don't tell you how much time it should take you, what in the world you should be doing in that assignment, where do you start? And then half the words that they said in describing that assignment, you don't understand. And then they, breeze out of your office and you're left there like, I don't understand anything that just happened to me. And so then you like run into your senior associate's office or your other colleague's office and you're like, what in the world should I be doing? And so the really important thing is to not just take it for granted and say, okay, I just don't understand it because I'm too new. I think that it's a very normal thing. Our brains just are trained that if we don't get it, sometimes we just gloss over it and just act like, oh, we're not supposed to know that because we're too new. Every single one of those is an opportunity for you to learn something new about the practice, for you to gain new skills. And so look that up, make sure that you do the work, look it up if you can. If you don't even know where to look it up, then you ask your senior partner like, hey, this is what I've tried. I started looking on all these places, but I wasn't able to find the answer. Can you tell me, is there a better place I can go to find the answer, or do you know the answer? And then that way people will see like you're putting in the work to try to figure it out yourself, but you're not just like lazily asking them like for an answer, but that you're also being super intellectually curious and making sure that you track down all the things that you don't know, because there's going to be just loads of things you don't know. and you need to be good about questioning that every time and being like, this is an opportunity for me to learn, instead of just sitting there feeling powerless, feeling like I just don't know. It's important that you're resourceful and you go hunt that answer down and go look that word up. And my partner, one of my partners used to always say his biggest pet peeve about associates is whenever they ask him questions that they could GTS. And I was like, what's GTS? And he's like, Google that shit. If you can Google that shit, don't ask me. And I was like, oh. And so like literally make sure that you GTS and before you ask your partner. Because if you can find the answer on your own, they're not gonna like it if you ask. So, yeah. Alrighty. Well, does anybody else have any questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much again for your time today. And I've absolutely loved hearing everything about your story, Devora. And if anybody else has any questions, feel free to reach out to her on LinkedIn. And we'll be sending out the recording link for all the people who registered. And we'll also post the video on YouTube after we cut it. So tomorrow we have a networking happy hour. So we do a virtual networking happy hour every other week, and it's for law students, lawyers, and pre-law students. So you get to meet all those different types of people, and it's really fun because we break everybody out into breakout rooms, and you get to meet people one-on-one. So you're not just in like a massive group like this, but instead you actually get to connect with other people and talk to other people and interact. And so if you've been just sitting in your house or whatever and you've been all alone and you haven't been able to get a lot of human interaction, come join us tomorrow for the virtual happy hour. I'll drop the registration link into the chat box. It's at 4 p.m. Tomorrow, and 4 p.m. Central, by the way. Sorry, I always have to specify Central Time because I'm the only one in Central Time generally. So I'll drop the link into the chat box, and yeah, I look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow or next week on one of our meetups. So thanks so much, Devora.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. Bye, everybody.
All right. So register, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.